still have all this information, the prophecies, all building up to this birth of the Messiah, more testimony after that of who this child's going to be, temple stuff, ground zero. And what happens? Well, the human problem happens. Some people caught on and some people didn't. And my point being, same information. They all heard the same stories and came to two completely different outcomes. Follow him or hate him. The fact is, the human problem is we see what we want to see. I remember I was a young lad on my bicycle. I believe my brother and I were trying to make it to a Wiener Schnitzel. And as we drove down the street, there was a car accident right in front of us, and we stopped and looked. And I don't remember how old I was, probably 12, give or take, 13, something like that, 12. They started yelling back and forth at each other. What do you think they were discussing? Whose fault it was? You guys are good at this. I wish I had gifts for everybody. You guys are good at this. Yes. Whose fault it was? And one person was positive it was the other guy's fault, and the other guy was positive it was his fault. It was only one accident, but both were seeing what they wanted to see. Think about some of the things that were said in the Bible. Remember a story read about Jesus going to Hanukkah. Jesus went to the festival lights, the festival of dedication. Well, just two verses, that was in John 10. Just a few verses before that, he's talking about Jesus' teachings. And it says in John 10, verse 19, the Jews who heard these words were again divided. Why? Verse 20, many of them said he is demon-possessed and raving mad. Why listen to him? What did they just call Jesus? Demon-possessed and raving mad. Verse 21, but others said, these are not the sayings of a man possessed by a demon. Can a demon open the eyes of the blind? So here, the same words, same event, same scene, two completely different outcomes. And remember, that's how this started out. Was I found this little thing where the guy said, what was his exact words? What have you seen, what have you heard and seen this Christmas? And he goes into, what if you had been there that night, what would you have seen and heard? But he starts off by saying, what have you seen and heard this Christmas, the present Christmas? Then he adds, again, Brett Blair, he adds, there is one way of knowing. Ask yourself what you've seen and heard this Christmas season. When you watch the 6 o'clock news, did you see chaos and strife, or did you see sheep without a shepherd? Those are two different outcomes of the same thing. And one is much more Christian than the other. When you went to do your shopping, did you see only hordes of people in the stores? But did you notice the worried expressions on some of their faces? Worried because they're facing this Christmas without employment or enough money, or they don't know how they're going to make ends meet. What did you hear this Christmas? Did you hear only the blast of music and carols? Or did you hear the silent sighs of the lonely and the bereaved who may be dreading Christmas because it only accentuates their loneliness? And in the midst of the sounds of honking horns and people arguing over parking places, did you hear the faint sounds of laughter coming? And he mentions Asbury Church Missions Project, because you furnish food and toys for families and children. Well, so he mentions you can do these things. You can hear these voices too in the midst of all the other noises if you're doing it right. Then he adds, you see, so often what you see and what you hear is not dependent on the event, but upon you. Something everybody in this room has agreed with. If you did in fact hear the cry of the lonely, the laughter of the poor, and saw the sheep without a shepherd, then and only then might you have noticed the events that took place in Bethlehem that night. If you lacked that spiritual seeing and hearing, then you probably would have been with the 99% who saw or heard nothing out of the ordinary. And then he adds, in the end, perhaps, one of our carols' words is best. It's from the little town of Bethlehem. No ear may hear his coming, but in this world of sin, where meek souls shall receive him still, the dear Christ enters in.